Good evening. This is Amy Johnson.
And Aaron Smith with the 6 o'clock Devonshire newscast.
Tonight we are following up on the case of the Hound of the Baskervilles. Joining us will be special guests involved with the case.
About a month ago, the mystery of Sir Charles Baskerville's death was the start of a long, difficile case investigated by the famous detective Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Many citizens of Devonshire believe that the myth of Hugo Baskerville and the vicious hound relates to the death of Sir Charles. Witnesses have expressed their concern towards the myth, declaring that they have seen sightings of the hound upon the moor.
Sources have informed DNC that Sir Charles was a very superstitious man, and he believed that the hound could be haunting the Baskerville family. One source is convinced that even the sight of a mere dog would scare the man to death.
While friends and family were mourning the death of Sir Charles, a new heir to the Baskerville estate, Sir Henry Baskerville, was arriving from America. Sir Henry, a determined man, insisted he stay at the Baskerville Hall, despite the deadly myth that had feared the family for many generations.
Dr. Mortimer, a former doctor and friend of Sir Charles, accompanied the baronet to seek help from Holmes and his assistant, Dr. Watson, about a letter that troubled Sir Henry. The letter stated, "If you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor." Holmes then decided in Sir Henry's best interest that he would go to the Baskerville Hall with Watson, a trusted protector.
As each day went by, Watson studied neighbors carefully and came to close relations with the Stapleton. Mr. Jack Stapleton, a naturalist, and his sister Beryl Stapleton lived in the Merripit house along the moor. Sir Henry found Miss Stapleton to be very attractive, and she soon became his love interest.
Miss Stapleton kept pursuing Sir Henry to leave the moor if he wanted to stay alive. He wouldn't leave, though, without her at his side, so he asked for her hand in marriage. A lonely Stapleton wanted to protect his sister, and so he asked Sir Henry to court her in a period of 3 months.
Later that week, Watson, being a light sleeper, heard the footsteps of someone creeping by his door. Sir Henry and Watson waited for the right moment to follow the person walking around the hall at night. They then found out it was Mr. Barrymore, the butler of Baskerville Hall, who was shining a candle onto an opening of the moor.
During those happenings, there was an escaped convict known as the Notting Hill murderer. Later, after interrogation, Watson and Sir Henry discovered that the escaped convict was Mrs. Barrymore's younger brother, Selden.
Sir Henry and Watson agreed not to tell the police, but they went out onto the moor to find him. They chased him and failed to capture Selden, but Watson noticed a man's silhouette upon the shore. In exchange for their silence about Selden, Watson was informed by Mr. Barrymore that there was a letter that came to Sir Charles which was separate from the last. The letter was found by Mrs. Barrymore, burned, with the initials of L.L.
After finding the letter and investigating it as much as possible, Mortimer told Watson that the only person he knows with the initial of L.L. is Laura Lyons, who lived in Combe Tracy. Later that day, he went and visited her. As soon as he met her, he started interrogating her about her relations with Sir Charles. Laura answered his questions with very vague answers, but Watson knew that there was much more to the story.
During the next week, Watson discovered that Holmes was living in a stone hut out on the moor. Later on, Holmes made the connection between Hugo Baskerville and Stapleton. They looked identical.
It was then detected that Stapleton was the son of Sir Roger Baskerville, Sir Charles's brother, who fled to South America. Holmes also discovered that Miss Stapleton was Stapleton's wife, a Costa Rican native. Holmes had a strong feeling that Stapleton was the murderer behind Sir Charles's death, but he still needed the proof.
Holmes then decided to get the proof he needed. He would have to have Sir Henry be alone upon the moor. That was when Holmes established his plan. He would tell Sir Henry he and Watson were going back to London, and that after dinner at the Stapletons, Sir Henry had to walk home alone upon the moor.
Sir Henry did as he was instructed, and Holmes, Watson, and Lestrade, an extra detective, were waiting to save him. As fog rolled upon the moor, the hound was released and it attacked Sir Henry. Luckily, Holmes shot the hound in time before Sir Henry could be hurt. They then rushed to the Merripit house to look for Stapleton, but they discovered Miss Stapleton tied to a pole and gagged in a locked bedroom.
Miss Stapleton informed them that Stapleton most likely fled to the Grippenmire, where the Hound was held. The next day, the detectives searched the Grippenmire, coming to the conclusion that Stapleton was the murderer and died while trying to escape.
The reason Stapleton wanted to kill the Baskervilles so that he could receive the Baskerville inheritance, since he was the next heir after Sir Henry. The only thing Holmes was unsure of was how Stapleton would claim the inheritance.
The case of the Hound of the Baskervilles was finally solved, and the myth could be put to rest.
Joining us now are Sir Henry and Miss Stapleton to answer some of our questions that have left us and many others very curious. Welcome, Sir Henry and Miss Stapleton. It is a pleasure to have you here this evening. My first question for you is, are you two still together?
No, after all the difficulties with Stapleton, we decided it best for us to be apart.
Sir Henry, how did you feel when you received the anonymous letter in London?
At first, I was afraid, because I had just arrived in London and I was already being threatened.
Beryl, what made you write the warning letter to Sir Henry?
I truly did not want to be part of the murder, and I also wanted to warn Sir Henry of the dangers upon the moor. I also thought if I were to write the letter, I would not be caught by my late husband and be punished.
Sir Henry, how did you decide to go to the hall even though you knew about the dangers?
I was determined to solve the mystery, and I knew I would have Watson to protect me.
Beryl, how did you feel when Sir Henry arrived to Devonshire?
I was afraid, for I didn't want Sir Henry to be killed. I also was not on board with Jack's plan to receive the inheritance.
Henry, how did you feel when you were attacked by the Hound?
I was filled with fear. The only thought that would go through my mind was I was going to die.
On a happier note, what are your upcoming plans?
I'm going on a trip with Mortimer.
Now I'm going back to Costa Rica.
Thank you so much for joining me today and answering our questions. I hope all is well for the both of you in the future. This was the DNC coming to you live from Devonshire. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.